My name is Melissa Goodwin, and I'm going to read to you today a passage from my newest book, Candles in the Windows, A Christmas Romance. This is the story of a young woman in her early 30s named Michelle, who's just returned to her hometown after a 5-year absence. She's had some changes in her life and she wants to make a new start. And she's come back to see if her hometown is the right place for her to try to do that now. But her homecoming is bittersweet, particularly because her parents have both passed away. And so there's no one there in the town that's family to welcome her back. And the town itself is changing in the ways that towns do over time. The storefronts on Main Street are all different. Her favorite bookstore has moved to a smaller space across the street, and a restaurant is going in where the bookstore had been. But hardest to take is when she passes her old family home and sees that it's not looking quite as loved as it had been when she and her family lived there. So the passage that I'm going to share with you now picks up with Michelle making a visit to a former neighbor who happens to live in the house across the street from where Michelle lived as a child. And so she, from the vantage point of the neighbor's dining room window, she can look across and see the house. And this passage tells us what she sees and what she remembers, and also a little bit about how that makes her feel. Michelle positioned herself at the dining room table so she could look through the front window while Mrs. Bloom went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. She gazed over at the house she'd grown up in and had been their family's home for nearly 30 years. Now, even in the light of day, it was a blank slate. No cars in the driveway, no lights on, no kids playing in the yard, and nothing that spoke to the personalities of the owners. Nothing about the way it looked now spoke to her of home, and she found that feeling very strange. Closing her eyes, she summoned images of the house as she remembered it from childhood. The branches of the hawthorn tree that had been in the front yard, laden with white flowers in spring. The red poppies that took over the garden along the wall in early summer. The purple lilac under her brother Rob's window, which he always referred to as my lilac bush. The forsythia at the back corner of the yard, under which they had buried her first cat, Cuddles. The climbing pink roses Mom had planted along the post and beam fence. The maple tree at the end of the driveway in full color in autumn. She pictured herself, Rob, and Molly playing tag with neighborhood kids, using the front steps and the trees as home, and the giant snow fort they had built in the side yard, in which they had launched epic snowball fights. A smile played across her face as she remembered helping her mother decorate the yard for Christmas. She could almost hear Mom's exasperated tone when she'd ask, "Why do we always decide to hang garland on the fence when there's a wind chill factor of -10? But they'd both be laughing as they battled the elements, determined to get the job done. And after, they'd sit by the fire, warming their chapped cheeks and chilled fingers and toes, rewarding themselves with hot cocoa with marshmallows. Her smile widened as she pictured herself zooming from room to room at dusk to turn on the bulbs and the electric candles that sat on every windowsill, because she didn't want anyone to drive by the house and see only half of them lit. Later, she'd put on her coat, walk down to the spot where she'd paused yesterday, and look back at her cozy little home, warmly lit with the soft glow of candles in every window. To Michelle, that sight had been magical. When she opened her eyes, she saw no wreath on the front door, no garland swirled around the post and beam fence, no whiskey barrel filled with greens and berries by the kitchen steps, no sleds leaning against the chimney, and no candles in the windows. Comparing the scene before her to the memory she had so vividly conjured in her mind a moment ago, brought a bittersweet ache to her heart. So I hope that gives you a feel for a sense of the feeling of this story. It goes on that to for Michelle to meet some old friends and to join together with those old friends to try to save a beloved school that is under threat of demolition. And so we follow Michelle's journey through that with her friends, and along the way, we hope she finds love. So this book is available on Amazon.com, at Barnes and Noble, and you can order it from any bookstore. I hope you'll also check out my middle grade novels, ages 8 and up, The Christmas Village and its sequel, Return to Canterbury, and my short book of poems that I put out this year called The Brook in the Woods Behind Our Old House. I thank you for listening, and I hope you have a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a beautiful holiday season.